Hello and welcome to the episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast with me, Mark Bracknell, Managing Director of Theo James Recruitment. Today we're welcoming on Graham Puntis, the CEO of Quanta EPC. What an episode this was. This was like a core old school episode of the Manufacturing Leaders podcast, where we talked about everything leadership. You are going to become a better leader from listening to this episode, I can guarantee that. Graham talked about his time growing up as a leader at Rolls-Royce and the lessons he took from that. He talked about turning the org chart upside down and how he ensures he empowers people, how you give people a voice, and how you essentially lead together as a team. One of my key takeaways was actually the importance of making a decision, not standing still, making that decision and using the data available to you at that time. And that was something I really took away. But he also talks a lot about the 5 fundamental processes that any successful business has. Graham has worked for a variety of companies, both on a permanent basis and interim basis all around the world. He brings everything back to these 5 fundamental processes to really simplify becoming and being a leader. We also talk a lot about STEM, and we talk about the lack of women and the underdiverse groups in manufacturing and what we need to be doing behind empowering that and improving that, before we talk in detail about how the Northeast, despite the fact neither of us are from the Northeast, we talk in detail about the passion, the skill set here, and the opportunities that this region has to offer as well. So please join me and listen or watch this episode. As ever, please do me the honor of liking and subscribing. It really helps grow the channel. So thank you very much. Sit back and I hope you enjoy the episode. Excellent. A massive warm welcome today to Graham Puntis, the CEO of Quanta EPC. Graham, how are we doing? All good?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Mark. Good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this one. It's going to be some real interesting conversations if our pre-chat has got anything to go by. But so I'm going to get straight into it. First question is the same question I ask everyone that comes on the show, which is, what does it mean to you to be a leader?
I think that's a really good question. Really good place to start. So for me, being a leader is all about accountability, responsibility, and driving things forward to places where perhaps other people might not be able to take the business. I think that it's all about being prepared to put yourself on the line for benefit of others, and I think it's all about not being afraid to take some risks that you understand. I picked up a great work ethic, if you like, from Rolls-Royce many years ago, and that was having the will to take rational risks. Don't go blundering into stuff that you don't understand, but absolutely step back, look at something, say, is that risk worth taking, not just for you, but for the business and for everybody else that it impacts, and then work out your direction from there.
Is that ethos, obviously you picked it up from Rolls-Royce, but is that changed over time and I guess perfected over time to some extent? Have you felt that, or has it just been a natural move?
I think that the risks that I am prepared to take are different to the ones that I used to take, and I think that my decision-making process towards being able to make that risk, take that step towards that risk, I think that's changed. I think that's evolved, refined, and probably become honed over the years. And of course, it's also driven by market dynamics. You know, if you're in a tricky spot, a tight spot, you might be prepared to take more risk than if everything was plain sailing. So I think yes, changed over the years. I think I am more considered than I used to be. I think I take I don't think I take any longer to make the decisions. I've always been very keen on the idea that you should make a decision relatively quickly, and I've also always subscribed to the idea that if you don't make a decision, nothing will happen. So it's better to take a decision, and if it turns out to be the wrong decision, you just turn around and make a different one and try a different direction.
Yeah, I like that, because so I guess like anything, every decision we make is based on the data we've got, and that might be actual data or that might be emotional data of experience we've had in years gone by. So I think that's how leaders evolve, don't they? They learn from mistakes they made, from those decisions they once did it perhaps didn't work out, but the positive is they'll perhaps make a better one after.
I think that's absolutely right. So I've known a few people over the years that claim never to have made a mistake, and I would argue that they're the worst for it. I think really the real measure of how good a leader you are, it's are you prepared to take those risks and suffer the occasional mistake, and then the real measure is how quickly do you get back up and how hard do you continue to fight after you've made those mistakes, and can you accept those mistakes and learn from them. Don't look back on them. Make the best mistake that the best decision that you can make on the day with the information that you've got at hand. Make sure that you can look yourself in the mirror next day, next month, next year, and say, with the information that I had at that point in time, was that the best decision I could make? If the answer is yes, you've done a great job. Whether it was the right decision or not, you can make another one to change course in the future.
Love that. Yeah, I know you obviously mentioned Rolls-Royce, so we'll talk briefly about that. It's okay. How
Yeah.
you mentioned risk, Pete, but how do you think they help you as a leader and other leaders? Is that a conscious mold and process they go through, would you say, or is it just working for a good company and the habits that comes from that?
So they've got a very structured leadership development program, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. I got my first P&L job with them when I was about 27, 28. So some years ago now, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The best thing about it was that it gave me a structure in which to learn, and then a structure from which to develop, a structure from which I could find out who I was and how to make my own processes and my own decision-making processes, I guess, is what I would say. I did lots and lots of leadership and management courses with them. I think I learned something from every single one of them, and I think that I have probably taken something with me from every single one of those courses. Would I apply exactly the same process today as I applied? Well, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but more than 20. Would I apply exactly the same process? Probably not. Same principles, certainly yes.
I think what's interesting is that, and this is where it's a challenge for SMEs, isn't it? Because the bigger the business, the bigger the setup, the more support staff, the more people have got involved to create these, management training schools.
Yeah.
But I think that's where for years and years, a lot of industries have, but I think manufacturing and engineering in particular have probably neglected the importance of that training piece within managers and just presumed that if you're good at your job, you're a good engineer, you must be good at leading teams, where that isn't the case. I'm seeing that flip now. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I used to work for another company, which I won't name because of the story I'm going to tell you. But my boss was an absolutely excellent engineer, one of the best engineers I've ever come across. They're in the field of submarine design. Absolute genius. What that guy didn't know about submarines wasn't worth knowing. He did a fantastic job, and he became head of department. And at that point, the entire thing changed for him. So he would scurry in, head down, carrying his bag, sealing himself in his office all day. You wouldn't get to speak to him. He'd come out and leave at 5 o'clock, and it would be the same thing. He was not a leader. He was a brilliant engineer, but he was a terrible leader. And going back to Rolls-Royce, one of the most interesting things about the way they develop people is that they have two tracks. You can become a technical expert, or you can become a manager, a leader, a business unit director, and on into the ether. But the technical experts are afforded the same level of importance, the same level of pay. They take the same level of responsibility as the P&L leaders in a slightly different way. But it meant that you were really valued as a technical expert. I think so often in businesses, particularly smaller businesses, you see that very good engineers, very good technical people, they reach a glass ceiling and there isn't anywhere for them to go. They can't be paid more, they can't be developed more because of the structure, not because they're limited in their capability or their capacity. And then they get disillusioned and either become a shadow of their former self or go off and seek something else somewhere else.
Yeah, I completely agree. Which I guess leads on to, do you think that, do you think leaders, are you born a leader? Or because obviously that's the argument, isn't it? That you either are an engineer or you're a manager. Or do you think there's a lot of missed opportunities where people could have been great managers given the right training set of skills?
So I think that's a really interesting question. I do think there's an element of being naturally predisposed to taking responsibility, taking accountability, and wanting to stick your head above the parapet and do the best that you can. Um, I think that the skills of leadership can be learned,
Mhm.
and I think that you can have some really very capable managers, leaders that have been developed from being technical experts. I do think that the very best leaders amongst us, um, I think they're naturally drawn to it. I think if you're not prepared to take on you're taking responsibility for a lot of people, and you're taking responsibility for a lot of things. And I think that you have to be predisposed to wanting to do that.
Yeah.
The skills themselves, I think anybody could learn. But I think sometimes perhaps you've got to have a little bit of a death wish to want to pop your head up and be shot at all the time. But I think that's the difference.
I couldn't completely agree. I mean, in terms of the decision making, like you say, and that job of holding people accountable, of the leader being the one that has to put their head above sometimes and make those tricky decisions, which have an impact on people's lives in some situations.
Yeah.
Given the experience you've got now, how much do you think you should involve the senior team and people around you to help with those and perhaps sometimes the burden those decisions, or do you still feel as a leader it needs to come solely from the top? What are your thoughts on that? So I think people battle with that sometimes.
I mean, yeah, I do. I do. I don't think that it should come solely from the top. Um, my natural reaction is to take responsibility for the difficult decisions.
Mm.
Um, but I also believe that a senior team should have a degree of collective accountability. So I think that you have to select your team, you have to put the right people around the table, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not going to, and I never want to know the intimate detail of every single issue that's going on around me. I've always thought of myself as a bit like a conductor with an orchestra. So I'm sure the conductor of an orchestra can play lots and lots of different instruments to a reasonable degree. Is he going to be a virtuoso on every single one of those? Absolutely not. But he puts those virtuosos within the orchestra, and then he knows how to get the best out of them at the right time. And I guess that's how I try to think of myself. I've worked across a lot of industries. I've worked across lots of different countries. I've got all sorts of different experiences, and I like to try to draw on those experiences to help me get the best from the people that are the experts in their particular field within the room.
Yeah, it's I agree because actually, I mean, I shared before that I've battled before trying to lean into not lean to a weakness, but try and improve my weaknesses and kick myself that I should be better at this, should be better at that. Actually, I think leaders, if they lean into the strengths and then they hire into their weaknesses and delegate those tasks, that's when you create teams, isn't it?
I think that's very true. One of the biggest mistakes that I think that we make in the development of people is we expect them to even out their skills.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody who is really good, I don't know, he's really good at contract law, but he's not quite so good at some other aspect of commercial law. Don't develop the other aspects of commercial law. Make him the world's best at the bit that he's already really good at, and then go and find somebody else who's really good at the other bit. Now, obviously, you can't take that to an extreme, because then you end up with a massive team of people, which would never work. But I do think it's important to say, what are your real strengths, and you should really develop those strengths and become the best of the best at that particular aspect of your role. Um, you've got to have a degree of competence in everything else. You've got to be able to understand everything that is going on around you. but don't waste time and effort developing yourself into being really good at something that you're never going to be brilliant at. Just get somebody else to do that for you.
Yeah, I completely. I learned a lot from these podcasts from speaking to people like yourself, Graham. And one of the key takeaways I've made it is, and this is probably the way I've seen management change for the better the last sort of 10 years really, is people don't lead with ego as much as they used to, I think, in management. People now, it isn't all about the leader and all about them. It's about empowering people. And I think and I think people want to be empowered now, and they want to be part of the team and not necessarily told what to do, but they want to be involved now. People want a voice. Simple as that.
I've never understood the idea of hiring somebody on the basis that you think they're going to be really good at their job and
Yeah.
then tell them what to do. There's no point in that. They should be telling me what they need to do and how I can help them be better. One of the concepts that I like to think about a lot is the fact that the leader of an organization shouldn't be pulling it along from the front. What the leader should be doing is supporting it and providing everybody within the organization with the ability to be the best they can. I like to think of it as flipping the organization chart upside down,
Yeah.
and so I'll be there, holding it up, supporting everybody, doing absolutely the best that I can. Whenever they need me, I'll be there. I'll get in front of the customer. I'll get in front of the suppliers, whatever's required. But my job is to support them. It's not to drag them along.
I really like that concept, and that I think it's a great vision for someone to think about. If someone was to come into a role, whether that be interim position or whether they've just started a new position, and they have that mentality and they really want to get inside and make a difference, what would be the first things you would do to start to? Because I guess you can't do that on day one. So, what was the first thing you would start to do to get that to the level you were happy with?
I think the most important thing is understanding the individual skills that people have got. And once you understand what those individual skills are, you can be sure that you have put them in the right part of the organization, given them the right role, or even you might think about changing the responsibilities to suit. I don't think you should ever organize a business around a specific person. But what I do think you should do is once you've got the team of people that you are happy with, I do think you should think about what's the most effective way to split up the roles and responsibilities. Don't be constrained by perceived norms. Don't be constrained by what's already there. Don't be constrained by what's gone before. Think hard about how you can devise a way for the business to work that allows your people to shine. And then I think once you understand their skills and you've got to the point whereby you're confident that they are doing the right role with the right interfaces with the rest of your team, then it becomes all about empowerment. Give them a voice. Make sure that they can express their views. Make sure nobody is left behind in that conversation. Make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to contribute. Make sure that you look after this, because there's always going to be some quieter people in the group. Make sure that you look after them. Make sure that you draw out their voice. Empower everybody and give them the ability to act. And I think once you've done that, you should start to get to the point where you're a supportive leader rather than one that demands.
Yeah, tremendous advice that, and I think, and this is why for me, why the role of a manager, the career of a manager now is so much more exciting perhaps than it used to be, because what we're talking about here is the psychology of it's psychology of a person. It's getting to know someone. It's actually making
Yeah,
a difference where
yeah,
before I think leaders were just ambitious people who wanted to get to the top, and that's still okay. There's still those roles
yeah.
for people, but I think part of my job is speaking to people and understanding what makes them tick and actually what makes them unhappy, why they're leaving roles, and people stay at positions for less money now because the culture, because they have a voice, because they get on with the manager and they allow them they empower them. And I think this people talk a lot about attracting people. Just look after your retention. Just look after people, and the rest should, in theory, take care of itself. But that has evolved, I would say, over time, in my opinion.
I think that's true. I would say over the last sort of 10 years or so, I think it's become much more important to become an empathetic leader.
Yeah.
You need to have that degree of emotional intelligence if you want to build a strong, resilient team without a degree of turnover in it. And actually, I think that I don't think you should ever you should never see somebody leaving as a failure, because the chances are they want to leave because you've developed them to a point at which there is no more development available. And at that point, I think I think you should set them free and give them that turbo boost. They might come back in a few years' time and be better than they ever were. You should be proud of the opportunity that you've given them, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. That links into me in terms of, we mentioned the equality and making sure that everyone has a voice. And I think manufacturing is still underrepresented with a lot of minority groups. And we've talked before about STEM and diversity and the lack of women in manufacturing. I know that's something you've talked about and spoken about before. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So I think we've got a lack of diversity in general in senior technical positions across the UK. Well, not just technical positions, but technical organisations. The experience that I have over the years of bringing particularly a female voice into the boardroom, it has the ability to temper an awful lot of the sort of male ego that goes on within the boardroom.
Mhm.
I think that we've got a great untapped potential in having a much more diverse boardroom, a much more diverse engineering management team, a much more diverse STEM management team. I have two daughters. Both of them have got a relatively scientific brain, and yet still I see the opportunities for them to pursue that sort of scientific STEM type route. It gets closed down from a very, very early age. And I think that then ultimately you see that reflected in a very, very low number of women in candidate pools for jobs in technical organisations. I know some absolutely wonderful managing directors that I've worked with over the years, that have they've been absolutely brilliant, and those are women that have come through the ranks, have developed themselves, and I think we need to understand and accept that in actual fact, usually for a woman to reach that level, they need to have been better than the man, because the man can often just stand there and be recruited just because of who he is, and I think that's wrong. I think it's really important that we continue to encourage young girls right from a school age to take an interest in science, technology, engineering, maths, all of those types of subjects. We shouldn't, we shouldn't force them down it. I don't believe in quotas or anything like that. What I believe in is making the opportunities available and making people aware of those opportunities. If they choose to take them, fantastic. If they choose not to take them, that's equally valid and equally fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's I sit on the board of a UTC, New Aycliffe, and that is a school specially set up for engineering. So literally, it's a GCSE school, but they are trained to go on, and they still report a big drop off of girls when they get to 13, 14. There's a sudden drop off there, which is disappointing. Apologies for interrupting this episode with a very quick announcement about my business. Theo James are a specialist talent provider specifically to the manufacturing and engineering sector. I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved since our inception in 2015. We specialise in roles from semi-skilled trades right the way up to our TJ exec search arm of the business, both from the contract and permanent side. We offer both bespoke one-off campaigns for hard-to-fill roles or a full partnership service where we become an extension of your business. For any information, please get in touch with me or the team. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Thank you. Well, why do you think the drop off is predominantly then because it is still male dominated and it's a bit of a chicken egg situation, or is it more than that?
I don't really know. What I do think we should do is do the work to find out and understand.
Yeah.
Is it peer pressure? Is it societal norm? Is it a lack of perceived opportunities? I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that I would like to find ways to address that, and make sure that potentially great engineers, potentially great leaders are not turned off from a career in a STEM subject early on for whatever reason. Actually, whether they be male, female, whether they belong to an ethnic minority, I think it's actually all about just building out the opportunity for everybody, no matter where you come from, no matter what your background, and no matter what your ambition should be. The opportunity should be there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I still think manufacturing is almost still quite secretive. It's not marketed very well. You know, we drive past factories every day, and they're just, for outside looking in, they're just big sheds. But actually, a lot of these factories are
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. They are.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So when you think about it, any manufacturing process, it takes something simple and it
yeah,
adds value to it, and
yeah,
it transforms it into something of real use. You
yeah,
know, so pulling rubber from a tree and then turning it into a hose that keeps people safe on an offshore installation. That's actually really quite cool.
yeah.
If you think about building subsea robotic vehicles, things like ROVs and plows and trenches and so on.
Hmm.
We get the raw materials. We turn those raw materials into intermediate materials. We add an awful lot of IP to that, and then we develop something that is truly amazing.
Yeah.
The idea of building process plants with hundreds and hundreds of miles of pipe work and electrical cabling and process features of like pyrolysis, or there's just so much that goes on. It's incredibly exciting, and you're right. You drive down the road, and what do you see? You see a big grey shed.
Yeah, with no
You
windows.
might see some input and you might see some output, but you
Yeah.
don't see anything of what goes on in between. And
No.
it's astoundingly clever.
Yeah. It is, and I really hope with marketing, being more predominant, more relevant now, and companies starting to be more visual. I hope that this type of stuff really helps, because then, that's how the people learn now. They learn on YouTube, they learn on Instagram, and all this type of stuff. And I think they
Yeah,
need to be more visual. My youngest, my little lad, is 6, and I've taken him around a couple of factories. And he now wants to be an engineer because
that's
he's seen
awesome.
robots at work, and
Yeah, yeah,
for that is the most impressionable age. He might get end up being old and not want to, but right now he loves it and he wants to be it, and he's got a maths brain, and I can see it's in him. But they just need to give really young people that exposure to actually, because it's amazing, some of this stuff, like it is. And don't be wrong, there's some really good companies doing a lot of good, and it is probably the most challenging time right now for companies to go, right, we're going to go meet schools. And so, because they're trying to keep businesses
yeah,
alive, I get that.
yeah.
But there needs to be more stuff done collectively, collaboratively, to ensure that. Because I completely agree, there is a massive lack of women in engineering. And what I've seen in a lot of companies, as soon as you get one or two really good female leaders on the board, that starts to trickle down, and you starts to give
Yeah, I'd agree.
people that confidence, doesn't it? But it just takes some time, and we just need action to do that. So I completely agree.
And I
We
think the driver to it is getting the interest early. If you
yeah,
get the interest early, and you create a curiosity about what it could be,
mhm,
then ultimately you should end up with a broader career pool.
yeah,
I got into engineering because every Saturday morning, while my parents were still in bed, I got up and I watched Thunderbirds, and I loved it.
yeah,
Rockets and submarines and cars and all of that sort of thing. And that was what sparked my interest in engineering. I don't do engineering anymore. I was never the world's best engineer. I think I've made a few engineering mistakes over the years, which I'm proud to put my hand up to. But that's what really hooked me. And I think that we need to make sure that those hooks are available for the young people today. Actually,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And more so at this hopefully will help. But it needs to be, it's probably still needs to be parents help push it as well. You know, a
yeah,
lot of companies I work with now do apprenticeship days where they actually have open nights for the parents, because I still think,
yeah,
you know, there's 15, 16-year-olds. But the problem with 15, 16-year-olds, a lot of them, it's too late. You know, it's getting them in young,
yeah.
like you say, when they do see rockets and defend and all this type of stuff, and they connect the two together. So it's not just something on television; it's something they can get involved in early doors. Well,
It's early engagement, isn't it? And that can take the form of all sorts of things. From if you're fixing something at home,
mhm.
show your kids, get
Yeah,
them involved. What you're
yeah,
doing, or you know, if you're doing something else, or you're doing some research on a bit of work, show them what you're doing. Talk to them about what you're doing. Have a discussion over dinner about you know what's the most exciting thing that you did today. And I think if you can capture people's imaginations early on, they've got the opportunity to do some incredible stuff all over the world in some incredible places with some incredible people actually.
yeah. Completely agree. And we're both sat in the northeast of England here, and you know, neither is from the area. You've worked many areas across the world. What do you
Yeah.
think? What observations have you got about the northeast, and how is it different? Would you say to other areas you've worked with and worked in?
I think there is a very, very strong sense of community in the
Yeah.
Northeast. And I think there is also a very, very strong sense of history. Um, I think my earliest involvement with the Northeast was back when the Swan Hunter shipyard was in Wallsend. I was working for the Ministry of Defence at the time, and I spent quite a lot of time both here and in Glasgow, and also over in Northern Ireland, looking after the build of the Type 23 frigates and how we had to modify the design of those to increase their design life. What I remember about coming to the Northeast at the time and coming to the shipyard was the passion that everybody showed for that. Um, I think it's I think it's a shame when you see the state of shipbuilding across the UK and particularly in the Northeast and also in Glasgow, that all of those opportunities that really provided really strong entrances to really interesting careers, they've dwindled away. What I do like, what I'm particularly pleased to see in the Northeast is the establishment of a real cluster of capability in offshore engineering,
Yeah.
subsea engineering. We're seeing an awful lot of activity, particularly around the sort of Newcastle Blythe area,
Mm.
for very capable subsea engineering. If you look down towards Teesside, you see an awful lot of process work going on,
Yeah.
and there's a fair amount of carbon capture work going on down there. And I'm really pleased to see that coming back up. I think that we are in a fairly unique position in that an awful lot of people, talented people who come originally from the Northeast, they go away, they study, but they come back again.
Yeah.
Also, we do. So you're not from the Northeast. I'm not from the Northeast. But I think that once you arrive here, when you're drawn here by an opportunity, it's very difficult to move away again.
Don't leave.
And
Yeah.
I think that I you know I thought I'd be here. I moved here in 2016. Thought I'd be here for 3 or 4 years and then go and do something else. Here I am, nearly 10 years later, and I'm here for good. You know, my daughter's at school here. We've got some great friends, and there's great opportunity, and there's lots and lots of people out there to work with and collaborate with.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the real strengths of the Northeast.
Yeah. I completely agree. It's interesting because, like you say, we are neither of us are from the northeast, but we're both talking about it about how special it is, and I think that in itself proves it. And exactly same, you know, I've got a family, you know, my family are from the northeast, and there's not a chance that we'll move now. And I am look, the market manufacturing engineering across the full UK has its challenges without doubt, but I do think the
Yeah,
northeast is a prime location for hopefully more support. from the government to push things through, because I think the talent up here is excellent. It really is. I think it's set up in a perfect way to really sort of build and get involved in any sort of future projects. And yeah, hopefully it's there. It's very much there to stay. Before I let you go, I'd like to talk a little bit about I guess, lessons you've learned, Graham, in terms of from your business piece, and I guess processes that you have. We've touched on it already in terms of whether it be Rolls-Royce or all the different types of roles you've had. What do you think are the core processes that underpin every successful business, would you say?
So I think every business is underpinned by the same 5 core processes. Um, as I've worked in lots of different places. I've done several stints of interim work over the years as well, and it's really really interesting how whenever you go to a new business, either as an interim or as a permanent employee, everybody says, "Oh, it's different here. We don't work like everybody else." And to a degree, I can accept that about culture. But fundamentally, you've got 5 core business processes that everybody needs to adhere to. You need a proposition. You need to develop some inquiries. You need to turn those inquiries into orders. You need to deliver against those orders, and you need to collect some cash. Now, there isn't a business out there that is different to that. So I've always held with the principle of simplifying things as much as you possibly can and bringing them back to those 5 key processes. Wrap that with a layer of understanding of the people and the culture. And then I think that if you can focus on the interfaces between people, between different parts of the processes, and then between yourself and your supply chain and your customers, if you can focus on those areas, you'll be pretty well equipped to work in just about any business, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I think sometimes you can't see wood through trees, and I think that's a really nice, simple way of looking at things. Well, interesting
Yeah.
on that interim piece. When you start working with a company, like you say, every company is different, but it's still underpinned with those processes. What are the typical challenges you tend to come up against, would you say, and then maybe the first things you would tackle?
So the thing that always strikes me is that almost everybody says you can't change that because we've done it like this for years. And I know it's a trope, and I know that it sounds like just an easy thing to say. But I just don't believe that. I believe that you should challenge everything. And the first thing that I ask whenever I get into a new business is why? Why do we do that? And then not just why do we do that, why do we do it like that? And then follow that up with how could we do it differently? And I think that if you can take that sort of mindset into a business, you've got a good platform for, first of all, stabilization if you're in a turnaround situation, but then also you've got a good platform for growth, because if you understand those 3 things intrinsically, you can get to the point where you can see how the business needs to change relatively rapidly. And if you don't change these days, you're standing still, because all of your competitors will be changing faster than you are, and in effect, you're not standing still; you're falling behind them. So get in and ask those 3 questions.
And what I really love about that is you're asking, not telling, because I think people have this pressure on you when you come
Yeah.
as a leader that they must come in and tell people what, but actually you're leading with curiosity, aren't you, essentially?
Yeah, when I join a new business, I don't know anything about it. You can go through a 2-stage, 3-stage interview process. You can do all of your desk research. You can ask around your network. You can find out what's on the website. You can get some understanding of what the place is about, but you don't know it.
Yeah.
And the first thing you have to do is get to know the business and prioritize the areas that need attention. Leave the stuff that's working for later, fix the stuff that isn't working, but fix it by asking why we do it like that, what are we doing, and how can we do it differently.
Love it. Couple of reflection questions, I guess. What's been the hardest time you can think of in your leadership journey, would you say?
I closed a business once. That was really really challenging. My remit in that role was to work out whether or not a business could be saved or not, and come up with either a save or close plan. Um, that was really really hard, because that was my first real experience of taking decisions that had a material and lasting impact on people's lives. That was in Norway in 2002. That was a really really steep learning curve for me. It's also actually one of my proudest moments is that the day that I shut the doors on that business, not one single person went out of that business without having another job to go to. I'd either placed them elsewhere, so that was when I was with Rolls-Royce. I'd either placed them elsewhere in the group, either within country or elsewhere, or I had facilitated movement to other organisations that had similar capabilities. And in one or two instances, I'd actually helped people set up their own business and start to work independently. Yeah, that was both it was a sad day, but it was a day that I look back on and think. I mentioned earlier, you have to make the best decision that you can on the day with the information that you have. That was a day where I could really look back and say, yeah, I did a good job there, and I made the right decisions based on the information that I had. Would I do it differently now with different information? Possibly, yes. But nobody suffered, even though that business had to go.
Yeah, love that. Few just a two or three quick fire questions to end. That's okay.
Mm.
Classic one away, but I'm always curious about this one. If you could go back to the first managerial role you took, what advice would you give yourself, knowing now what you know?
Lose the ego.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lose the ego. Understand that you are not the most important person in the room. Understand that you don't know more than all of the other people in the room. Use the knowledge that is in the room.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. Who's the best? I know you don't know that. I've not prepped you any of these questions. So, but who's the best manager you've ever had and why?
The best manager I've ever had. Okay. So that was a guy called Tony Casillo. And I joined a business to run their Europe, Middle East, and Africa service division. It was rotating equipment, steam turbine generators, and axial compressors. I had best part of 400 people working for me across 7 locations, spread across UK, Northern Europe, into the Middle East. Tony Casillo was somebody who sat and listened and took on board the views of everybody that was around him. He did then take the decision, and he took the responsibility for the decision that he made. But he was a guy that I could really relate to the way in which he reached those decisions, and I could really relate to the way in which he took the knowledge in the room, distilled it, and found the best answer that he could. I really enjoyed working for him. He was a great guy.
Yeah, great, perfect stuff. And just finally, what any books or audio books that you recommend? Anything which has helped you over the years? What do you say?
So I'm actually a fan of picking little snippets out of all sorts of different areas,
Mm.
because I think that it doesn't matter how many times how much you read, how many different things you research, how many models you try. I think what you'll actually find is that you need to develop your own model that suits your own personality and your own way of doing things, and you assemble that by taking all of the different best bits from each of the model that you've learnt about. I think that there's a book called Drive that I really really like. I'm also a big fan of reading dystopian novels. And then I try to distill the lessons from those dystopian novels into things that I can take into leadership scenarios. Some of my favourites are Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. There's a book called The Iron Heel. Both of those are all about how you need to understand the way in which you interact with everybody else to be able to influence the outcome. And I think that's a great lesson.
Yeah, great tip. Love that. And just finally, Quanta EPC. What's happening in the next sort of 12 to 18 months? What's on the horizon?
So interesting times for us at the moment. We are currently finishing off the detailed design for a waste to energy plant down on Teesside. Next phase is to move into the EPC engineering, procurement, and construction phase for that project. That will take us around about 18 months from pushing the button. So that's very exciting. We are pushing on with a diversification project at the moment to try to take us outside of our normal customer regime. Quanta EPC's history was all offshore. Now, I think that there is significant opportunity in the process industry. I think there's an awful lot of work that we do at the moment for national gas transmission around the UK, and I'm trying to take the EPC element of the waste to energy design, the concept and detailed design work that we do for NGT, and apply that into different sectors. We've recently started doing some work on wind turbine construction. We've been helping a little bit in the offshore subsea industry. We are currently also starting to get into some really interesting work with biomass plants, which is another change of direction for us. So got some big plans, very, very ambitious plans over the next few years. I think, as I've said several times, the most important thing that I can do to help that business is think about how I support the rest of the team, and also make sure that I make the best decision with the information that I have at hand every time I'm called upon for an answer. But it's exciting times.
Yeah, really exciting. Well, excellent. Well, look, thank you so much for this. I always reflect at the end in terms of lessons I've learned, and so many here. I think that the key takeaway and the key action for me, which is important, I think is, you've just mentioned it again there, is to ensure that decision is made. Because I think if I sometimes reflect on my career and how that's progressed, I've maybe not made that decision for the fear of upsetting people or fear being the wrong one. And ultimately, exactly like you say, you don't make that decision, you're standing still or going backwards. So I really like that, and that's the takeaway. But actually, this episode has just given me a warm, fuzzy feeling about being a leader. And I think sometimes we because we're so busy, we neglect what a privilege it is to be in a position where you can empower people, and you can you can work with people you trust and they trust you, and you can have such an impact in their lives. And this is definitely me one of those episodes to me where it just brings it all back to really feel that it is such an unrivaled role where you can make such a big difference, but you are only one person. You've got to work together as a team. Simple as that. So
I love the word privilege in there. It is absolutely a privilege. I love being a leader. I love empowering other people. I love developing other people and giving them the opportunity to shine. Some of the best points in my career have been where I've helped people go off and do things and reach greater heights than I'll ever be able to reach. And for me, that's an incredible reward.
yeah, well, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Graham. I massively appreciate it. If people want to find you, what's the best way? LinkedIn, typically, or
LinkedIn? Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and just drop me a message there, and I'll always respond as quickly as I can.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Graham. This has been amazing. So, thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mark. It's been really good stuff. Really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Manufacturing Leaders Podcast. Please just like or subscribe. It really helps grow the show and obviously improve the industry. If you want any more information about Theo James, as I mentioned midway through the episode, please get in touch with me or the team. I would love to talk about how it can help you directly or your business. We are more than just a recruiter, and I know people say that, but it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. We are in business for much more than just a bums on seats approach. We want to help people grow. We want to help improve their lives. And ultimately, I want to work with businesses and people who share the same values as we do. And that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. So please, if that is you and you are passionate about that dream role or passionate about your people, please get in touch with me or the team. I would absolutely love to talk a bit more detail. Thank you very much. Speak soon.